You know what's funny about most people who claim to be Stoic? They've completely missed the point. They think Stoicism means suppressing emotions, pretending nothing bothers you, walking around with this fake calm while you're dying inside. That's not Stoicism. That's just emotional constipation with a philosophy degree. Real Stoicism is ruthless. It's uncomfortable. It strips away the lies you tell yourself and forces you to see reality without the comforting filters. And once you actually understand it, you become dangerously smart in a way that changes how you move through the world. I'm going to walk you through 6 lessons the ancient Stoics taught that most people can't handle. Not because they're complicated, but because they require you to give up the stories you use to avoid taking responsibility for your life. These aren't feel-good affirmations. These are psychological tools that, when you actually use them, make you sharper, clearer, harder to manipulate, and significantly more effective. First lesson: most of what you worry about is completely outside your control, and you're wasting your life trying to control it anyway. The Stoics had this concept they called the Dichotomy of Control. There are things you control: your thoughts, your actions, your responses, your effort. That's basically it. Everything else, other people's opinions, outcomes of your work, whether opportunities appear, what happens to you, completely outside your control. The ruthless part is accepting that your feelings about fairness don't change reality. You don't get to control outcomes just because you worked hard or because you deserve it. The universe doesn't care about your effort. Results come from a million variables, most of which you have zero influence over. You can spend your entire life being bitter about that, or you can accept it and focus your energy on the only thing you actually control: what you do next. Here's what this looks like practically. You apply for a job you really want. You nail the interview. You don't get it. Most people spiral into this story. They didn't value me. The process was unfair. I'm not good enough. That's you trying to control their decision. The Stoic approach is different. You did what you could. The outcome wasn't yours to control. What's your next action? Apply to the next opportunity. Improve your skills. Move forward. No drama, no spiral, no wasted energy on things that are already done. You don't get to use uncontrollable outcomes as an excuse to stop acting. Second lesson: your opinions are not facts, and most of your suffering comes from confusing the two. Epictetus said that people are disturbed not by things, but by their opinions about things. This sounds obvious until you examine how you think. Someone cuts you off in traffic. The action is neutral, but your mind immediately creates a story. They're disrespecting me. They think they're more important than me, and now you're angry. But you're not angry at the action. You're angry at your interpretation of what the action means. The Stoics understood that between stimulus and response, there's interpretation. Something happens, you interpret what it means, and then you respond based on that interpretation. But your interpretation is almost always partially or completely wrong because you don't have complete information. You don't know why that person cut you off. You don't know, but your mind fills in the blanks with the story that makes you most upset. And then you respond to that story as if it's truth. Here's the ruthless reality. Most of your emotional reactions are to stories you made up. Your boss gives you critical feedback. The feedback is just information, but your mind interprets it as, they don't value me. I'm going to get fired. I'm failing. None of that is in the feedback. That's all your interpretation. And now you're spiraling based on things you completely invented. The Stoic practice is to catch yourself adding interpretation to facts and strip it away. What actually happened? Just the facts. Your boss said X needs improvement. That's it. Everything else is your opinion about what that means. And once you separate fact from opinion, you can respond to reality instead of to your anxiety-generating stories. This is dangerously smart because once you get good at this, you become very hard to emotionally manipulate. People try to upset you by doing things they think will upset you. But if you control your interpretation, they lose power over your emotional state. Someone tries to insult you. You can interpret it as an attack, or you can interpret it as information about their emotional state that has nothing to do with you. Your choice. Third lesson, you're going to die, and pretending you're not is making you waste the life you have. The Stoics practiced something called Memento Mori, remember you will die. They thought about death constantly, not in a morbid way, but as a tool to cut through the noise and focus on what actually matters. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself every morning that he and everyone around him would die, possibly today. This wasn't depression. This was clarity. Here's why this is ruthless. You're currently living as if you have infinite time. You're putting off things that matter. You're investing energy in things that don't. You're staying in situations that make you miserable. You're doing all of this because some part of you believes you'll always have time to fix it later. But you won't. You're going to die. The Stoics used death awareness as a filter. Does this matter in light of mortality? Am I spending my limited time on this because it actually matters, or because I'm avoiding making harder choices? The confrontation with mortality forces honesty. You can't bullshit yourself about what matters when you're staring at the fact that your time is finite. Spending your limited heartbeats in resentment is insane. Once you really understand that you don't get those moments back, this makes you dangerously smart because you stop getting distracted by things that only seem important. Due to social pressure, what do you actually want to do with your limited existence? That's the question that matters. Fourth lesson, the obstacle is not blocking the path, it's revealing the path. Marcus Aurelius wrote that impediments to action advance action, and what stands in the way becomes the way. This is probably the most misunderstood Stoic principle. It's not positive thinking. He meant that obstacles force you to adapt, and adaptation is how you grow. The ruthless part, you don't get growth from comfort. You get growth from resistance. The obstacle isn't blocking your development, it's the mechanism of your development. You want to build muscle? You need resistance. You want to get smarter? You need problems that expose your ignorance. Most people treat obstacles as evidence that they're on the wrong path. Something's hard, so they quit. The Stoics would tell you that's backwards. The difficulty is the point. The fact that it's hard means it's actually giving you something valuable. If you engage with it, you start a business and it's way harder than expected. The Stoic looks and asks, what is this difficulty teaching me? The business isn't failing to punish you. It's revealing exactly where you need to grow. Every problem is a precise diagnostic of your current limitations. This makes you dangerously smart because you stop being afraid of difficulty. Failure stops being something to avoid and becomes information. Fifth lesson, your character is revealed by how you act when no one's watching and nothing external is forcing you. The Stoics believed virtue, wisdom, courage, justice, self-discipline was the only good. Not because being good makes the universe reward you, but because developing character is the only thing that's entirely within your control and can't be taken from you. Here's the ruthless reality. Most people only act well when there's external pressure. They're kind when people are watching. They're honest when there are consequences for lying. They work hard when their job is on the line. The second the external pressure disappears, so does the behavior. That's not character. That's just fear of consequences or desire for approval. Real character is what you do when no one knows and nothing external changes based on your choice. Do you tell the truth when lying would be easier and nobody would know? Do you treat people well even when they have no power over you? That's where character lives. And most people discover they have very little of it when they actually examine this honestly. The Stoic practice was to constantly test and strengthen character, because a person of character can't be broken by external circumstances. Someone with real integrity doesn't fall apart when systems collapse, because their behavior isn't dependent on systems. Someone with real discipline doesn't need accountability partners because they hold themselves accountable. Here's why this makes you dangerously smart. You become independent. Most people are controlled by their environment. Put them in a situation where bad behavior is rewarded and they'll act badly. They're just responding to incentives like trained animals. But someone with real character does what's right, regardless of incentives. You can't control them with reward or punishment. You can't manipulate them with social pressure. They've decided who they are, and external circumstances don't change that. Practically, this means you do what you say you'll do even when you don't feel like it. You maintain your standards even when lowering them would be easier. Not because anyone's forcing you to, but because you've decided that's who you are. That kind of person is rare. That kind of person is powerful. Sixth lesson, which ties everything together. Most of life is outside your control, but your response to life is entirely within your control, and that's where all your power lives. The Stoics believe that external circumstances are neither good nor bad, they're neutral. What makes them good or bad is how you respond. You lose your job. That's neutral. Your response determines whether it destroys you or develops you. Here's the ruthless truth. You don't get to choose what happens to you. Complaining about that is pointless. It's already done. The only question that matters is, what are you going to do about it? Your circumstances don't determine your life. Your response to your circumstances determines your life. Most people spend enormous energy trying to arrange their circumstances to be comfortable. They think if they can just get the right job, right relationship, right money, then they'll be happy. The Stoics would tell you that's delusional, because circumstances constantly change. If your well-being depends on circumstances staying favorable, you're setting yourself up for constant anxiety and eventual collapse. The Stoic approach is to build well-being that doesn't depend on circumstances. You develop the capacity to respond well regardless of what happens. You face failure. You respond with learning instead of defeat. The circumstances change constantly, but your capacity to respond well becomes stable. This is dangerously smart because it makes you anti-fragile. Most people break when life gets difficult. The Stoic is anti-fragile. Put them in difficult circumstances and they get stronger because they've trained their response capacity. They're not dependent on life being easy. Here's how you practice this. When something happens that you didn't want, pause before reacting. Your instinct is to immediately label it good or bad and respond emotionally. Don't. Just observe. This happened. It's neutral. Now what's the response that serves me? Your power is in that pause, in that choice of response. Now here's what happens when you internalize these 6 lessons. You become very difficult to control. Most people are controlled by their emotions, their fears, their need for approval. You trigger their emotions and you control their behavior. But someone who's integrated Stoic principles operates differently. They don't waste energy on things they can't control, so you can't manipulate them with threats. They separate fact from interpretation, so you can't manipulate them with emotional stories. They've built character, so you can't buy them with rewards or scare them with punishments. They control their response, so circumstances don't control them. That person is free in a way most people never experience. And that freedom comes entirely from internal work. And this is why I called these lessons ruthless, because they don't give you permission to blame circumstances, other people, or your past for how your life is going. They put all the responsibility for your response on you. That responsibility is heavier than victimhood, but it's also where all your power lives. So the question isn't whether these lessons are true. They are. The question is whether you're willing to actually practice them despite how uncomfortable they make you. Because that discomfort is growth. That discomfort is you breaking out of reactive patterns and becoming someone who chooses their responses instead of being controlled by circumstances. That's the path to being dangerously smart.